Cause on your screen where every vid's a gorgeous dream, reactions full of light and fun, empowerment for everyone.
Answering your most asked question about being married to a serial killer. Were there any indications along the way that I remember about him that would make me think that he was a serial killer? Honestly, no. There was nothing that indicated this to me. The first question I asked the FBI when they told me was, how did I not know that this was going on when I was married to him for 8.5 years? Their answer to me was that serial killers are usually sociopaths, and sociopaths are really good at compartmentalizing. So when they're over here doing one thing, and then they're over here doing something else, the two things do not bleed over. And so it's really easy for them to hide things. That in fact, if I had seen signs, then he wouldn't have been a sociopath, and he probably wouldn't have gotten away with the crimes the way that he did. And I know this isn't anything that anybody wants to hear, but that was what the FBI had told me. And you know, looking back at my life through this new lens, certainly things stand out in a different light than they did when I was married to him. But still nothing really that would make me think that he had committed these crimes. How I was married to a serial killer, part 9. I left off last time when the FBI had dropped the news about Mark being a serial killer, and how that changed my lens that I now looked back at my marriage. Suddenly I had all these memories and all these things that never really stood out to me before, but in this new light, I started looking at things quite differently. One of the things was when we lived in San Diego, he always had me going to self-defense classes, and was concerned that I know how to defend myself, and was always looking over my shoulder and paying attention to my surroundings, and getting quickly into my car, and if there was ever somebody who would approach me, or if I was ever in a situation, that I would know how to defend myself. That certainly looked a lot different looking back than it did at the time. I mean, of course, a lot of people did that. It is definitely interesting that he was basically teaching me how to protect myself against somebody like him. So the other thing that really stood out in my mind when I heard the news was when we were living in Virginia the last year. They thought at the time that there were 2 serial killers living among us. There was a lot of things that were happening. It was a pretty stressful time. It had a lot of us speculating about who this person was, and everybody was glued to the news, and it was just a really scary time, especially for women. I remember one evening in particular, after watching the news, being concerned and expressing my concern to him about that I was afraid, and I came home late at night. I would work until 9 o'clock at night at this point at the salon. I was worried about being out late by myself, and he assured me that he didn't really think I had anything to worry about because I didn't fit the profile of the women that were being killed. At the time, there was this guy who was pulling over women, flagging them down like they were having car trouble. Most of the people, I think, got away, but there was one girl who was murdered, and that's still, I believe, it's still an unsolved case at this time. That was the person I was worried about. We were all really stressed out about this thing. So he was telling me how I didn't fit the profile, and I didn't really understand what he was talking about, because I don't, you know, I was never, still not somebody who follows true crime. I was like, what do you mean profile? And he said, well, he says serial killers usually have a particular type of person that they're looking for. So maybe they don't like their mother, or they're angry with their mother. So they try to find somebody who looks like their mother, and they can, you know, they can kill their mother without actually killing their mother. I kind of understood what he was saying, but it didn't really make me feel any better, because I kind of felt like there were too many things going on in the area at the time to make me just kind of feel at ease. And I wasn't following it closely enough to really be sure that I didn't fit some type of profile that he was talking about. But you know, he was always reading everything and watching the news, and he was really up on everything. So, and he was kind of a know-it-all, and he liked to, you know, act like he knew everything. So I just kind of, you know, I sort of took his word for it and went from there. Looking back though, it certainly does seem like he's letting me know, hey, you're safe. It's not going to happen to you. The other thing is he always had kind of a dark sense of humor. And I mean, in just a sense of humor in general. He was always joking about everything. And then he often had a dark sense of humor. And a lot of people have a dark sense of humor. So again, not something that you would typically need to be concerned about. But looking back with this new lens, I distinctly remember a day when, again, you know, it was during this time when there was a serial killer, and they were just starting to identify the fact that they felt like they had a serial killer on their hands. And we were getting ready for work, listening to the news, and Mark walks from the kitchen into the living room holding his bowl of cornflakes. And he's walking into the living room holding his bowl of cornflakes and the spoon, and he's stabbing the cereal with his spoon, saying, "Look, I'm a serial killer," as a play on words. At the time, I was just like, you're an idiot. That's not funny. But it's just kind of the way he was. He was always making light of things, or just doing plays on words, joking around. I kind of rolled my eyes. I'm just like, oh my God, you know, that's a bad one. And I went ahead and got ready for work and kind of went on about my day. And of course, looking back at that, that's fucking terrifying, because he's basically telling me, hey, look at me, I'm a serial killer. He told me. I don't really know don't know what to tell you guys. The whole nother thing, you know, like looking back is always different than when you're going through things. But those were two definite situations where, looking back, it's pretty disturbing. More in part 10. Put a finger down if you were married at 17, divorced by 25, remarried, had 2 children, and then 5 years later, the FBI showed up at your door to find out that your first husband was a serial killer who murdered 3 girls, one of which while you were still married. And then 20 years later, found out that he was actually murdering people before you were married and throughout your entire marriage. Hey guys, just wanted to pop on here real quick and say thank you for all your support in waiting for me to come out with the next part of my video. It's taken a bit of an emotional toll going through this process to post these videos. So the past few days, I just sort of took a break and worked on some self-care and just getting grounded, spending time with my boyfriend and my dog and my kitties, and worked in the garden. And today I got a massage, which is why my eyelashes look kind of scrunchy. And because my face was in a face cradle this afternoon, which was much needed, and Like I said in previous videos, I wasn't really expecting all of this. I didn't have a particular plan in mind, but I will spend some more time answering your questions. My next video, I'm going to talk about trust issues, as a lot of you guys have questioned how it's possible for me to trust ever again. But again, I just wanted to say thank you. I really appreciate those of you who have been patient with me and have supported me with your comments and recognize that this is not easy for me to do. So, talk to you guys soon. Bye-bye. How I Was Married to a Serial Killer, Part 10. Okay guys, sorry for the delay in posting. I'm not going to get into my reasons. I'm just going to get right to it. I left off last time with talking about when the FBI had showed up at my door and delivered the news that my ex-husband was a serial killer. And in looking back over my life, things looked way different through this new lens of knowledge. And one of the things that you guys have been asking me is, how do you trust or how do you love after finding something like this out? So at the time when I found out that he was a serial killer, I was married and I had 2 babies. One was 3 months old and one was 2 years old. So I really didn't have a whole lot of time to think about that. But over time, it definitely created some issues in my marriage because it made me begin to question my husband. You know, the fact that I had trusted him as well, and the fact that I had absolutely no clue that my ex-husband had been doing these things. And even though we had trouble in our marriage, it certainly didn't point to anything out of the ordinary at this level. So I began overly analyzing what was happening in my marriage, or whether or not he was telling me the truth about his life, and what he was doing, and all of those types of things. But over time, as I looked back, one of the things that I noticed was that I did have bad feelings that something was going on. I really thought that, maybe he was having an affair or something like that. That's really what I thought. And I would go through his things occasionally trying to find clues. I never found anything. And, the truth is that he was always exactly where he was supposed to be. Now, of course, this was way back before cell phones and everything. I think probably, a few months before I left Virginia, I had gotten my first cell phone, and that was I left in January of 1997. So this was not, it wasn't a regular thing to call home and, check in on each other. We would go through the entire day without any type of contact. And we both got up in the morning and went on about our business. He was always home when he was supposed to be. We had dinner together. We went over our day. There was nothing at all out of the ordinary. I did have an instinct that something wasn't right. But when I would question him about this, he would always say things to make me doubt my intuition. He definitely defended himself and assured me that there was nothing going on, that I was jealous and insecure and I had issues. And, you know, at this point in our marriage, I didn't trust my intuition because of so many years of being taught to doubt my intuition. So if there's anything I would suggest to people who are in relationships where they feel like something's off, I would say to trust that. And I am in no position to give advice on what to do if you're in an abusive relationship and you're unsafe and you need to get out. I definitely recommend finding somebody to talk to, and you know, if it's a hotline, if it's a close friend, if it's anybody, I would definitely recommend finding a way to get help and break the silence. I did not have the feeling that I was in an unsafe relationship and that I was actually escaping. I did have, at the time when I started having problems and telling him that I wanted to, I didn't tell him that I wanted a divorce. I told him I was unhappy, and he told me that I wanted a divorce. And so in making that decision, things did get very sketchy. I go into more of this type of stuff in my book. I'm not going to go through all of the scenes that happened. But I will say that in looking back and seeing that there weren't any specific signs that made me think that this could be going on, it definitely created issues in my marriage, and I began not trusting him. Up until the time that I had found out this news, I was a pretty trustful person. I never had I take, and I still do tend to take things at face value. I am a trustworthy person. I don't lie. I don't create I'm not ever trying to be something other than who I am, and therefore I don't think that other people are behaving that way towards me. The way that I dealt with back when I first learned about Mark and the crimes that he committed, the way that I dealt with it then was just realizing that had I found anything that suggested that this was going on when I was searching through his things, looking for evidence of an affair, if I had figured it out, I might not be alive today. So the fact that I didn't know saved me. And I still do believe that. I don't know what would have happened if I would have found something and confronted it. I don't know what he would have done. So I kind of found peace in the fact of, I'm going to know what I'm going to know. I'm going to find out what I need to find out. And the things that I'm not meant to know, then that's just the way it goes. And I can't go through life wondering all the what ifs and of things that there's no way I could possibly know. You can't know everything about every person. Everybody has private parts that they don't share. Normally, they're not private parts as crazy as these types of private parts, but you definitely, everybody has private aspects of themselves, and you're never going to know anything other than what people want you to know and your gut feeling on whether that lines up or feels right. So the big takeaway that I had was that I needed to trust my intuition, and I've grown much better at realizing what my intuition is telling me, and even if I don't quite understand it, I listen to it and I question things and look for answers, and ultimately if it doesn't feel right, then I get out of the situation. At the time when I found out about Mark and his murders and being a serial killer, I was under the impression that he had murdered only one person during our marriage. But in recent years, that information has changed as they're investigating more and more crimes, which makes it look like he could have been doing it during our marriage, before our marriage. And that changes everything. More in part 11. Storytime, Being Married to a Serial Killer, part 11. A lot of people have been asking me if I think that Mark had killed somebody the weekend that I decided to go back into my house to pack up my belongings before I left Virginia. And also, people are asking how I felt safe. Like, they couldn't believe that I could feel safe to go back into my house by myself to pack up my things. And so I wanted to take a second to answer both of those questions. I didn't feel uncomfortable going back to the house by myself because at the time he had been talking to this other girl online, and he had expressed to me that he was going to drive to North Carolina to meet her finally. And so I met him at the house the weekend that he said I could stay there. I met him at the house before he left to go meet her. And it felt really weird. He was talking about this girl and looking forward to meeting her, and I thought it was kind of crazy that he was moving on so quickly, especially because he had been so upset about me leaving him, and was, up until that time wanting me to change my mind. So it was kind of weird, but I was relieved. Honestly, I was just relieved that he had something else to focus on other than the fact that I was getting ready to pack up my stuff and leave. So I got up and left at 4 a.m. to go to California and hit the road, and it was probably about 11 o'clock when I was in Kentucky. He called me on my cell phone and was really upset, could not believe that I was actually gone. And I was confused because he wasn't even supposed to be home until I think Sunday night, or maybe even Monday, probably Sunday night. And I asked him, what happened? Why are you home? And he said that he went to North Carolina to meet this girl and that she never showed up. And so he rushed back home, hoping to catch me before I left. And he was home, and he just couldn't believe that I had actually left him. He couldn't believe I was gone and begged me to come back. And I was driving. I'm in Kentucky, and as hard as it was for me to make that decision to leave, once I was on the road, I was done. There was definitely no turning back. So there was no way I was going to come home, and I told him that, and I hung up the phone, and I went on about getting to California. And years later, I spoke with a detective about that girl because I had always wondered, after hearing the news and finding out that my ex-husband was a serial killer, what really happened? Did he go and pick up this girl and, was she dead too? And they told me that they had actually contacted this girl after finding their communications in his cell phones, and they investigated it, and they were able to talk to her. And apparently he had come down to North Carolina and showed up at her work with a dozen roses and a hotel key, saying, hey, meet me at the hotel after work. And I guess having him show up there was just too much for a little bit, you know, it was too much reality or whatever, and she didn't have a good vibe about it, and she listened to her intuition and she didn't go. So to answer that question, like maybe he was heading down there to he probably didn't have good intentions with that girl, I would imagine, but she's okay because she listened to her intuition, which is such a relief to hear that. More in part 12. Hey guys, I just wanted to step on here for a minute and answer some of your questions. The biggest question that I get is, why do you call him Mark instead of Richard when I refer to my ex-husband, who is Richard Ivanitz, who turned out to be a serial killer? The reason that I refer to him as Mark is that's the name that he went by. His name was Richard Mark Ivanitz, and he went by his middle name of Mark, unless it was an official document like his driver's license or medical records or anything that required his full given name. Now, I don't want this to be confused as me paying some type of respect to him and honoring his name for his namesake, or some term of endearment towards him. It couldn't be anything farther from that, actually. It would give me like a whole lot less anxiety and would trigger me a lot less if I could just refer to him as Richard. But unfortunately, he shares a name with his uncle and his cousin, who are two people that I really very much respect and love and care about. And I cannot fathom how they would feel having that name associated with a serial killer. So when I refer to him, I'm sure to call him by the name that he went by so that there's no confusion as to who I'm speaking about. Hopefully that helps clear up some of the confusion. I know it must be hard because everything that's written about him is under the name of Richard, but everything that you hear from me will be referring to him by the name that he went by, which is Mark. Thank you. Hey guys, answering your questions again about finding out I was married to a serial killer. This person asked, if you could sit with Mark and have a conversation, what would your discussion be with him? Well, honestly, I don't want to have a conversation with him. I would not want to sit with him and talk to him. But I do think it would be helpful if somebody could talk to him and ask about what other crimes he committed, because before he died, he told his sister that he had committed more crimes than he could remember. And unfortunately, he took that with him when he killed himself, and that leaves law enforcement and detectives and everybody going through piece by piece, painstakingly finding clues to sort out these crimes that they think were possibly connected with him. So that'd probably be my only question for him is, what else? What did you do? Because so far he's only been, 100% connected to 3 murders and obviously the abduction of Kara Robinson. So Yeah, that'd probably be it. I wouldn't want to see him again. I wouldn't want to talk to him. And I probably don't really want to know all of the things other than the closure that it could help these families who would like to know what happened to their loved ones. So anyways, hope you guys are having a good day, and I will talk to you soon.
We weather through phases. It's about a girl who loves a boy who never loved her back, and a boy that loves a girl who never really could love herself. I'm in here done with y'all, bruh, 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 bruh. Rude customers, yeah, broker. Rude customers, I'm in here done with y'all, bird music and triz, office, man learn. Man learn she cheated. Man learn she coming home. When I learned she had really never done it before. I had to referee the big dogs from being born. Look, he learned she was it, made me none sick. Some psychics don't know love's contagious. Shocked I caught, it's crazy how I made it. Though dying every day since it was real love I met. Man, I'm stairs, started eyeing through the lift with no steps. I could see it though she had chairs. Satin sheets cause bad sleep.